Love it.
I
Love it, baby.
do want to talk about, what the NFL is in an interesting time where I feel like, partially it's like fantasy football,
Yeah.
Madden, this kind of culture in general, but it's the offensive rules and the wide receiver position is almost being. I don't want to say I think as a wide receiver aficionado myself, I almost feel like blasphemous saying this, but I think it went from being undervalued to just a touch overvalued now. Um,
Agreed.
and I'm curious, do you know what I mean by
I
that? Like,
do.
it's almost
Yeah,
like
I
an
do.
overcorrection where it was like it was undervalued for years, and it's like it's really important that you have playmakers. And now it's getting to the point where it's like, okay, we can't pay these guys like quarterbacks. Like that's a little ridiculous. But I want to, but beyond that point, I do think that this was the kind of wide receiver draft in terms of depth,
Mhm.
um, if you will. So kind of like we talked about quarterbacks, I'm curious as to who's your receiver in this draft and why. And give me a couple sleepers. Give me a couple guys that you're like, these guys could be stars, but they're not sort of the obvious.
Yeah. No, well, speaking of obvious, I am very high on Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he's gonna be
Same.
so dynamic. And I think that not so much because he does have like all the physical attributes. He feels like LeBron coming into the NFL, right? It's just like you have
Hmm.
everything. But he also has a dad who's a very like level-headed guy who was never very diva-ish and um seems to have gotten him very prepared for the NFL. Like I think and
Sure.
I know people are like and I'm gonna kind of take the opposite stance of what I'm seeing online right now. Like he hasn't signed his NFL PA contract agreement, right? And I was reading into this.
Daddy put him on
I
game.
was reading into this a little bit because everybody was pissed off
Yep.
about it, and I'm like, well, okay, well, what's the benefit of not signing it, right? Like, so let me look into this and see what the deal is basically. And what I
Hmm.
read and what I learned was that the NFL, once you sign that agreement, they can sell off your jerseys, right? Like they take that agreement and they say, okay, here, Fanatics, start pumping out the Cardinals jerseys, and we're gonna pay, the NFLPA a lump sum, and then he'll get
Hmm.
he'll get a piece of that lump sum. So what
Right.
Marvin's doing is like, nah, if you want my name and likeness, you're gonna come pay me and you're gonna make me a deal. I'm not gonna pay the lumps. I'm not gonna get a
Mm.
percentage of the lump sum. You're gonna pay me directly if you're gonna be selling my jerseys and making millions off my jerseys. I'm getting a fucking cut of that shit. And frankly,
Show me the money.
I feel him. I feel him, man. I mean, this is your life, bro. Like there's
It's
no
a new world.
there's no need to um kind of kowtow to like like and it's kind of like it's whack in the sense of like does this affect your ability to be in Madden? Like are you just going to be like player 18, and everybody's going to know that it's you, but like Madden's not going to cut you a deal. Like that could be a little annoying cuz it's like, ah man, I want to play with him in like the video game. But if it's like
Sure. Screw Madden.
I mean totally screw Madden. That's how I feel, but
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
feel like I'm not talking for myself. I'm talking for the myself at 12 years old who loved Madden and who's a
Totally understand what you're saying.
the
Yeah.
diehard Arizona Cardinals
Yeah.
fan who cannot wait to buy the new Madden so he can play with his favorite player. That's who I'm more thinking
Yep.
about. And I think that in that regard, it is a bit lame if you never reach that agreement. But hey, if Madden's smart, they'll come to you and they'll make you an offer. Um, Not holding my breath on that because Madden and smart typically don't go in the same sentence as we just discussed. But uh,
Right.
as far as like Fanatics goes and these big companies who are pumping out these dog shit jerseys for $130, I mean, absolutely all day, baby. Come, you want my likeness? Come get it. Come buy me. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I think people were pretty mad at him for not doing like the combine and shit, but I don't know. I kind of feel him. It's like, what do I need to prove myself for? What if I fuck around and get hurt? What if
Yeah.
he's very much protecting the bag, and I'm just not mad at that. I'm just not mad at that.
Right.
Especially when you have a dad who's been through the process, who knows what to do, who knows all the ins and outs of the league. You getting this advice in your ear, being like, you don't really have to do that. That shit doesn't matter, bro. You're already projected.
Right.
You're already projected top three. Everybody knows you're wide receiver one. Everybody's known that you were wide receiver one last year.
Yeah.
So what? I mean, what does it matter what your 40 time is? You're gonna go out there and ball. Arizona's taking
Right.
you. You're the furthest you're gonna drop is 6, maybe. You know what I mean? Like Giants would
Yeah.
have taken him,
Yeah.
Chargers would have taken him probably.
Yeah. I
I don't
agree.
know, man.
Yeah.
I think his mentality for his as lame as it is when these nobodies go online and they're like, "Ma, he should sign the NFLPA. What a piece of shit." It's like, I don't know, bro. This is his life. This is this man's life. If he's protecting his
Yeah.
assets, that makes him a very smart 20-year-old kid, in my opinion. And I salute him. I
Right.
think the mentality is in the right spot. Whether you like it or not, I think it's in the right
Yeah.
spot.
I agree with you. And I think it can be a little bit discouraging sometimes when you look at a situation and you think to yourself, you know, what would I do in this situation? And you and I are civilians, and we would just want the bag, right? But like
100%.
he's thinking a step ahead, and his dad, being a former player, is probably putting him on game, and the agents that his dad has probably set him up with,
Yeah.
are putting him on game, right?
Yeah.
So he's already a step ahead of this. But I agree with you about Marv. It seems like it's a lazy take to say that he's your favorite receiver in this draft, but some things just are. You know,
100%. He's
LeBron was
just
the
my
guy,
favorite.
not Wade, not Melo,
Yeah.
but those guys are dogs too,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I also
And
think I'd go as far, just to allude on that real quick. Like, I think I'd go as far to say
yeah,
he's my favorite player in this draft. You know what I mean? It's not even that he's my favorite receiver.
same,
I think he's my favorite
same.
player.
Yeah, we've talked
And
about this. Yeah, he's mine too.
yeah.
And I think yeah, I think a big obvious part of that is the talent.
Hmm.
I do think he's in a different bracket in terms of like well-roundedness
Yeah,
as
I
a
totally agree.
receiving talent and a receiving prospect. I do think that we're going to be discussing him with the Tyreeks and the Justin
Very
Jeffersons
quickly.
and the CDs probably before this season ends, but essentially 100% going into next season. And that's just my prediction. But I think what's interesting too is, with everything, landing spot is so important. And, the other receivers that we were sort of discussing in his bracket, right? In his tier, which I think is kind of untrue to begin with, but
Yeah.
I'm just playing devil's
Sure.
advocate. Were Roma Dunze and Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
I don't like where Roma Dunze went.
Mm-mm.
You've alluded to it. I've alluded to it. I don't like that coaching staff. I
No.
don't like Shane Waldron. I don't like Matt Eberflus. I don't really believe in Caleb. That's a whole different conversation. But all those things are true for me. And I do believe that Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and having Gerald Everett there as an addition and having a pass-catching running back as a free agent addition and having Cole Kmet there as a tight end, I think there's one football, and I think
Totally agree.
Adunze is going to struggle to take over next year because I don't believe, like I do with Marv in terms of well-roundedness
Hmm.
and overall talent, and Neighbors in terms of excitement and explosiveness. I don't believe that Adunze really has either of those things. I
Yeah.
think he's much more of a two and a Larry Fitzgerald and a Mushin Mohammed and that kind of receiver.
Hmm.
I think he's really going to struggle to get the amount of looks that it takes to like really be a star next
Yeah.
season. Now we'll talk in the future after next year.
Yeah.
And then Malik Neighbors, I just don't like the Giants. I think they had a good draft. I think Dayball's a good coach. They lost their best
S-
offensive player.
Yeah.
I don't like their quarterback situation. I don't feel like that's where Neighbors wanted to go. There's been a lot of discussion about that, and I know nobody really wants to like listen to these guys, right? 'Cause it's
Yeah.
like a diva thing where it's like, oh, who does he think he is? He got
Hmm.
drafted. He's getting paid millions of dollars. I'm like, it's a new world, dude. These top 10 guys, they want to have a little say into where they're playing.
No,
Even
I
their
mean,
rookie
yeah,
contracts
you just
now.
watched
You know what
Marvin
I'm saying? I
Harrison
don't
get
think that's where he
well, you
wanted to
just
be.
watched Marvin Harrison get gifted Kyler Murray.
That's my
And
point. And I think that
the whole time you have
right.
to be thinking mentally, I'm about to get Justin Herbert. There's no way they're
Yeah.
passing on me. I'm the next best wide receiver, and their
Yep.
wide receiver one currently is Quentin fucking Johnson. I know he's the greatest.
I knew Jim was going to do that.
He's the greatest of all
I
time.
knew
We
Jim
know
was going to
that,
do
but
that.
that's besides the
Yeah.
point.
Yep.
I can go.
I knew Jim was going to do
Of
that.
course, we both did because
Yeah.
we know how
Yeah.
Jim operates. But it's like I don't think Neighbors knew that. You know what I mean? Because you look at it
No.
objectively, and you saw. I mean, dude, the mocks were the mocks for so long, right? Like Neighbors was very consistently mocked to the Chargers at 5. It was
And he
not.
was in Cali. He was down over in
Yeah, dude.
down out here on looking at beachfront property and shopping for homes. And yeah, I think he thought he was going to be a Charger. I didn't,
That's
but I'm sure he
rough,
did.
man. I forgot about
But
that. I forgot about that.
yeah, he was. He was.
Yeah.
But that's you addressed a really interesting thing that's not being discussed, and I'm addressing something a little more obvious, but I do think it can't be, it cannot be overstated how important landing spot is for young receivers. And I just like having a franchise quarterback in place, one who I believe in, unlike a lot of y'all. And I think that Arizona is going in the right direction. I don't think they're here, but I think they're going in the right direction. And I don't know that I feel that way about the Giants. And then with Odunze, it's just a depth chart issue. It just feels very Jackson Smith and Jigba in Seattle last year, where it's just like, yeah, you're good, but like, are we going to see you featured a bunch? Like, I don't know. It feels like Keenan Allen's like last stop is here. It feels like DJ Moore's time is now. It feels like these free agent additions are all offense.
Yeah.
And we'll see, right? But yeah, I like it, and I think those are the obvious ones. I wanted to ask you if there's a wide receiver that's not sort of the big three, right? Shout out to Kendrick. It really is just Big Me, but the
100%.
fictitious Big Three,
Yeah.
if you will. But is there a non-Big Three guy that you're looking at this year as sort of like everybody's like, you know what I mean? Like they don't know what's coming. This guy's gonna eat on like a star level potentially.
Yeah, not to sack ride this team too much because I feel like I'm coming back around on them, but I love the Troy Franklin pick by the Broncos because
So
Troy
interesting.
Franklin
Yeah, he fell
was
off.
he was like a projected like top, like probably late first round, early second round guy, and he fell to like the 7th or the 6th. It was, I mean, he went really late. I don't know exactly
Right.
where he got drafted, but I know it was in the later rounds, and I felt like that was really crazy for a guy who was projected so high all season. And I wouldn't like Troy Franklin if he didn't end up in Denver, because you're going with your quarterback who you absolutely lit it up with last year, and you already have
Yeah.
that chemistry built in. So
Yeah.
that
Love it.
it's not like, hey, bro,
I'm with you.
we're just meeting right now for the first time. Let's go practice. It's, oh, we've been doing this for a minute. Like we're actually like homeboys. Like let's go like get an apartment together and like let's live together for the next year and a half because we're like best friends. You know what I mean? Like I feel like Bo Nix probably had a say in that pick. Like probably saw that he was like
Yeah.
sliding and was like, hey coach, like I don't know. Like he's it's very, very much with CJ Stroud and Tank Dell last year of like, hey, go get my boy.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those situations where he's like, all right, bro's falling, like go get him, please. If you want to help me
Yeah.
out, you know what I mean? Excuse me.
Yeah, and it's interesting you point that out, because the other component to this is Denver is like a new company, almost like looking for good employees.
Yep.
It's like they don't have. I mean, they have Cortland Sutton, but he's holding out allegedly. And I'm
Yeah.
not so sure he's coming back.
No, he'd be a good trade piece for them. Like he'd be better suited somewhere else. He's a
but I'm
very
saying,
very good sneaky wide receiver, but he's not a one.
I agree. And they took that guy Mims last year,
Yep.
but he's an undersized speed merchant.
Yep.
Which I just
And
don't.
made
And
of
they
glass.
traded Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah.
Yes, they traded Jerry Jeudy to Cleveland, who gave him a little more money than. That's a whole different conversation.
yeah.
But they are looking for guys now to kind of fill that
100%.
lineup and like make plays. And I do think, I mean, he fell farther than he was supposed to, according to all of
Yeah,
us
I'm sorry,
morons who didn't quite put it together. So that's a really interesting one. And I do think that it's another situation, like you said, of situation kind of lining up for him to be a sleeper player. I'm going to kind of cop out on my sleeper. I do have a lot of sleepers that I like, but I want
fourth
to
round.
kind of
Fourth
go.
round.
Yeah,
That's
fourth round is
crazy, though.
I have some later picks that I really like. Javon Baker is a big one to me, and I could talk about him. But I want to talk about a guy who I think has a chance to be kind of a star, who's not being discussed enough, in my opinion, and that's Brian Thomas Jr.
Sure.
out of LSU. again, here we are, right? Like back in the same
Classic.
circle of like talking about landing spot, right? I like Doug Peterson as a coach. I like the addition of Gabe Davis because Gabe Davis is a non-issue. Gabe Davis is a field stretching boomer bust deep threat wide receiver who's essentially going to replace what they did with Ridley last year, which was
Fully.
nothing. Have him
Yeah.
run fly routes and clear out. I like Christian Kirk a lot, but he's a slot guy. He's an
Yeah.
underneath guy, and he has a tendency of getting banged up now.
Yeah.
We've seen like year after year, Christian Kirk can miss games.
Yes, he can.
Their tight end, Evan Ingram, is really good, but he's a tight end. He's a red zone threat.
Yep.
That's kind of it. I don't love their O-line, but I love their coach and quarterback enough. And I shouldn't say love. I like them enough that I think they can support a wide receiver one right now. And to me, Brian Thomas Jr. he's just that guy. Like if you watch his tape at LSU, he's explosive. He has hands. He makes plays on the ball. He can run underneath and make men miss. Underneath yards after catch.
Yeah.
He has wiggle to his routes. He's a huge deep ball threat, right? So you have that now with Trevor. And I just think that next year Jacksonville is going to come out with something to prove. I don't know that they're going to be world beaters, but I think that we're going to be looking at him next year kind of mid-season, late season, and being like, oh, that's right. Like, this guy was just about as good as Neighbors. And if Neighbors wasn't on LSU last year, I think Brian Thomas Jr. would be discussed even more if he had played at, like, I don't know, Georgia or something. You know, I mean, they had McConkey, but you know what I mean? Like a school without like another stud who ended up being like basically a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
He's really good. And I don't see a huge difference between him and Neighbors when I watched them play last year. And I watched a lot of LSU. And I like Jacksonville a lot more as a landing spot right now than I like New York.
Yeah.
So I think that's my sleeper. And he's not really a sleeper. It's a bit of a cop-out, but I do think
Yeah, but he's not really being
he's
talked
my
about in those
sleeper as,
top
like,
3.
being a star.
Yeah.
He's not being talked about as a potential star.
Yeah.
And that's how I view him. I think he has a chance to be a star if it works in